If you want to know about the secret meaning hidden in Ben's poem to Beverly, then stick around to the end of this video. This video is sponsored by Raycon. Each member of the Losers Club stopped being a loser after beating Pennywise and leaving Derry. The biggest transformation in adulthood comes from Ben Hanscom. Welcome to Horror History. My name is the guy from Tangled.
Look at this dude, man. You look like the guy from Tangled, man.
Alright, I can see it. In today's episode, we're taking a look at the life of Ben Hanscom, the strong foundation of the Losers Club, and the first to discover its biggest weakness. To find out how we got here, we've got to take it back to the start of the haystack. Ben was born on June 2nd, 1946 in Newport, Maine, about 20 miles west of Derry. Ben's father fought in the Korean War, but was killed. The war started in 1950, so Ben would have been 4 years old when he lost his father. His mother, Arlene, worked in the textile mill and didn't make much money, causing her to overfeed her son because she never felt like he was getting enough.
Look at that gut.
Ben displayed early signs of his brilliant architectural mind while playing with Lincoln Logs as a child. They moved to Derry in Ben's 5th grade year, and Ben had a hard time making friends because he was bullied for being overweight and was shy. This caused him to become reclusive, and he spent a lot of extra time at school or at the library. In January of 1958, he stayed after class to help his teacher, Mrs. Douglas, with the books. You have to understand that back then, people learned things by reading them out of books rather than watching horror history videos. He refused to accept a ride home and found himself walking over the canal bridge, where he saw a clown standing on the ice waving to him. The clown cast no shadow, and when it let go of the balloons it was holding, they floated against the wind, which was blowing out towards Ben. Pennywise asks him to come down into the sewers with him, telling him he'll never have to grow up, and making the sewers seem like a fair, telling him it'll be fun. As Ben gazes out, a hand springs up onto the bridge and reaches for him. Ben is able to escape, but he thinks it's the mummy in a clown suit. The disappearances in town start to increase, and Arlene gives her son a watch so that he'll always be home on time for dinner, and not out after dark with the potential kidnapper on the loose in Derry. Ben avoids telling his mom about what happened at the canal, not wanting to lose what little freedom he had. Near the end of the school year, he dreamt that he was playing baseball with the other boys, a fantasy likely brought on by both his desire to have friends and his self-loathing about his weight, leading him to imagine himself in an athletic scenario. In the dream, he hits a home run, and as he's rounding the bases, he notices a clown staring at him in the trees. He can't remember the rest of the dream, but when he wakes up, his pillow is wet, as if he'd cried all the way through the night, a detail that I found particularly chilling. Near the end of the school year in 1958, the school bully Henry Bowers asked Ben to let him copy during a test, but Ben hides his answers. Ben was always considered a good kid by most of the adults, such as his mother, the librarian, and his teacher, with whom he wants to stay in good graces. However, he quickly comes to regret the decision after learning of Henry's previous suspension after knocking a kid's teeth out. He hopes that Henry passed as the final report cards go out, and that maybe he would be off the hook if he did. He's careful to avoid Henry and his gang when leaving after the final day of school, and on his way out, he runs into his crush, a redheaded girl in his class named Beverly Marsh. He's in a great mood after talking to her and avoiding Bowers, so he stops at the candy shop before hitting the library. But what he doesn't realize is that Henry and his thugs saw him go inside. Upon entering, he notices the librarian, Miss Davies, reading the story of the 3 Billy Goats Gruff, a story about 3 Billy Goats who try to cross a bridge with a troll under it, and the portion she's reading reflects the struggle that Ben was about to partake in that summer. Would the monster be bested, or would it feed? Ben signs up for the summer reading program, and he notices a postcard display at the desk, so he buys a postcard and writes a haiku to his crush Beverly. Your hair is winter fire, January embers, my heart burns there too. Ben doesn't fully understand it yet, but love is one of the strongest weapons that he and the other kids have to fight against it. That's the reason they're able to beat it when they're all together at the end of that summer. The reason they're eventually able to escape the sewers, and the reason that they're able to save Mike from his attacker in the hospital in 1985. At this point, the only encounter Ben has had with it so far was on that freezing cold day in January. So the first 2 lines, your hair is winter fire, January embers, are a direct connection to his love for Beverly, guiding him past the evil that is it. His love would not help him against Henry Bowers, however, who ambushes him as soon as he leaves the library, and Ben would make one of the most important decisions of his young life. Normally here in the horror history classroom, I only teach you about horror history, but let me teach you something about economics. These are Raycons. They're half the cost of other premium wireless earbuds, but with my link, you're gonna get them even cheaper. I picked these up because I was tired of my old headset coming loose in my ear, and I was really tired of this wire hanging down and basically inviting whoever wants to come strangle me with it. With Raycons, you just put them in your ear and they stay there comfortably. You can go for a run, you can rock out to your favorite music like I'm about to right now. The sound quality is top-notch. They put out a clean, isolated sound on par with any other earbud on the market. And that's coming from someone who spends many hours every week doing high-quality sound mixes. This latest model is the best one yet. You get 6 hours of playtime. That's enough to get you through almost any domestic flight. And this little charging case has a battery life of its own, netting you a total of 24 hours of battery life. They've added more bass, packaged in a nice compact design, and they offer great looking color options. If you use the link in the description, that's buyraycon.com/CZsWorld, you're gonna be getting 15% off the already affordable price. Ditch the messy wires and join the next wave in audio with Raycon. Henry's plan is to carve his name into Ben's gut so that he never forgets to let him copy. And after carving the letter H, Ben retaliates by kicking off of Henry and sending himself tumbling down into the barrens. He ends up hiding in a divot in the earth behind some bushes and falls asleep there for a while, dreaming again of Pennywise before coming out and encountering Bill Denbrough and Eddie Hasbrack. Henry had taken some of his frustration out on Eddie, who was now having an asthma attack, and Ben agrees to stay with him while Bill runs to get his medicine. Ben creates a pile of rocks to use as ammo in case the bullies come back, a foreshadowing of a battle that would take place the following month. Bill returns at 4:30, and the kids introduce themselves to one another. It's at this point that Ben discovers his role in the group, and it can be seen as both a literal and metaphorical position. Ben is the builder. He offers to help Bill and Eddie rebuild their dam in the stream, and in doing so also helps build the foundations of the blooming friend group. His participation starts a snowball effect, where Richie, Stan, Beverly, and Mike all eventually join in on top of the foundations set by Ben, Bill, and Eddie that day in the barrens. Ben also gives Eddie the idea to spill a milkshake on himself to hide the blood on his shirt from his mother. I think I might have mixed that up in a previous video, but it's definitely Ben who's the one to give Eddie that idea. On the way home, Ben sees the Bowers gang again waiting for a bus, and once again hides until the bus picks them up. The next day, under Ben's leadership, they build the dam, and Richie and Stan show up to help. They effectively stop the water flow of the stream and create a small bog in the area that they had met in. Bill begins to tell the story about his run-in with Pennywise when the Derry police officer, Mr. Nell, interrupts them and explains that not only are they playing in dirty water, but their dam caused backups in people's drains in town. They end up having to deconstruct the damn thing, but that wouldn't be the only engineering idea that Ben would contribute to the group. One Saturday, not long after, Ben receives a call from Richie Tozier, inviting him to go to a horror double feature. Ben had no money to go, having spent everything on junk food, a habit instilled in him by his mother's feeding habits, but Richie offers to spot him. On the way there, Ben is once again nearly spotted by Henry Bowers. When he finally did arrive, he was overwhelmed as he found they would also be joined by Beverly. Richie explains his nickname for Ben, Haystack, which comes from the professional wrestler Haystack Calhoun. The three of them took the balcony to avoid the bullies, but are still spotted on the way out and subsequently cornered in the alley next to the movie theater. Henry, Belch, and Victor stand on one side, while two of Henry's other thugs take the other side. Ben had always been a good kid and never getting involved in fights, but with Beverly there, he goes berserk on the Bowers gang. He hurls a garbage can at Henry, knocking him over. Then he headbutts Victor, and the three are able to escape and run to the police station, which they stand outside of for a little while, thinking that Henry would have to be crazy to try to beat them up there. And Henry was crazy, but in this instance, he did not pursue them any further. One afternoon, Ben, Eddie, and Bradley Donovan are pitching pennies in Richard's alley, the alley next to Center Street Drug where Eddie gets his medication, when Bev finds and joins up with them. Beverly goes up against Bradley and wins, causing Bradley to accuse her of cheating. Now, Ben didn't think he had a real chance with Beverly because he was overweight, but he valiantly stands up for her anyways. Ben bounced to his feet. It was awesome to watch Ben Hanscom bounce. "Take that back!" Bradley looked at Ben, his mouth open. "What? Take it back. She didn't cheat." The confrontation ended with Bradley tearing up and running from the alley. Ben, Beverly, and Eddie decided to get ice cream frappes from the drugstore and eat them in the grass at Basie Park. Bev kisses Ben on the cheek for standing up for her, an event he would later play over and over in his head. After the group was joined by Stan, Beverly tells the story of how she saw blood in her bathroom sink, so they all sneak in her back door to see if they're able to see it too. The four of them clean it up together and take the bloody rags to the washateria in town to clean them, where Ben tries to comfort Beverly by telling her she isn't alone and explaining some of the other Pennywise sightings that some of them had endured. Ben is starting to understand that his love for Beverly, and similarly the platonic love shared among the friends, is what gives them the strength to discuss the horrors that plague Derry. But he would see a much greater impact by their power the following month. On July 3rd, Mike Hanlon approaches Ben, Bill, Beverly, Richie, Stan, and Eddie at the gravel pits in the Barrens, looking for protection against Henry Bowers. Ben had had more than enough of Henry terrorizing them and played a huge part in the rock fight that would ensue, pelting Henry with rocks, then going all Akeem Hicks on him by tackling him to the ground after seeing him hit Beverly with a pebble. hole. One of Henry's big thugs, a boy named Moose Sadler, took down Ben, but all of his friends had his back, and they pelted Moose with rocks until he peeled off. The whole thing only lasted 4 minutes, but by the end of it, Henry and his gang were gone. Mike had joined the group, now called the Losers Club, and Ben puked, likely a result of the unexpected uptick in physical activity, combined with the stress of having to deal with Bowers once again. With the 7 of them together now, they could start planning on how they might deal with Pennywise. But first, Ben had an idea to make sure that Bowers wouldn't get in their way again. Ben and the others spent most of that July with another engineering idea of Ben's, an underground clubhouse with a dirt-covered lid to camouflage it into the barrens. While they're building, Richie tells the group about real rock and roll, not that fake stuff that Ben listens to. If Richie wanted to listen to real rock and roll today, he'd use the superior sound quality of Raycon earbuds, by raycon.com/CZsWorld. Near the clubhouse's completion, they take a break and Mike shows them his father's photo album containing old shots of Derry's history, many of which include appearances by Pennywise. Mike turns to one photo that goes into motion and emits sound like a movie. Everyone in the picture turns away from Pennywise, who runs up to the losers, threatening to kill them all, and one of the forms it takes is the mummy that Ben had seen on the canal in January. They went on to finish the clubhouse in mid-July, and on the 17th, the cop that made them take down the dam before, Mr. Nell, came along and sat right on top of it without even realizing. Ben's design had worked to a T, but the real test would come later that summer. But before that happened, Ben had another idea of how they could possibly use the clubhouse, and told the others about an Indian ceremony known as the smoke hole ritual. The idea was that tribal chiefs trying to reach a decision would sit around a fire inside of a smoke hole and breathe in the smoke, which was supposed to give them visions showing them the path forward. Please don't try this though. I don't want anything to happen to any of you, because my view count will go down. I think Ben realized the danger pretty quickly, and he was the second one to climb out. But I do think that the smoke hole represents another instance of the motif established in Ben's poem to Beverly, where fire represents love, which is something that aids them in their battle against Pennywise. The smoke that fills their clubhouse is also the result of a burning flame, and the outcome is Richie and Mike being shown the origin of it, which helps them understand what they're up against. After a warning about Henry's deteriorating sanity from one of the other bullies, Victor Chris, and a clear example of his lack of sanity when Henry breaks Eddie's arm, the losers continue to develop their plan to take on it, but one incident in late July rushes their plan into action. Beverly witnesses a boy named Patrick Hochstetter being attacked by it in the form of a swarm of flying leeches. Bill breaks down in the rain and asks the others to help him take down the monster, and Ben and the others join him in a group embrace. Besides Eddie. Yeah, Eddie wasn't there for that. On July 23rd, wearing a large pair of wraparound turtle sunglasses for protection, Ben melts down the silver dollars given to him by his father with a blowtorch in the Denbro's garage to create the silver slugs that would be used as ammunition 2 days later when the losers arrived at 29 Neibolt Street. This was Ben's first time seeing the house, and the scent reminds him of what he imagines the mummy would smell like. They all crawled into the basement window under the porch, and Ben got stuck in the window frame, which was extremely embarrassing for him, especially in front of Beverly. Eventually, he's able to pass through, and the 7 losers go upstairs. There's something described as a girly book in the corner, which I assume is basically the 1950s version of the Hub, and when Ben glances at it, the cover girl winks at him. This is obviously one of the manipulations of it. This one in particular fits in with the themes of growing up and reaching adolescence, a process that begins immediately when they defeat it at the end of the summer. When they go on into the parlor, the room seemed too big to fit inside of the house. Kind of like in a video game where you go in somewhere and the inside is way bigger. It speaks to Ben inside of his head, telling him that on the outside, things always look bigger, possibly a taunt about Ben's weight. As this is happening, the others continue on and nearly lose Ben, so they all make sure to stay together after that. They come up to 3 doors and discover a destroyed bathroom behind the last one. Ben finds a pipe and looks down into it when he's hit by a thought. It was rushing toward them, moving at an express train speed, filling the throat of this dark pipe from side to side. It was in its own form now, whatever that might be. It would take some shape from their minds when it got here. And when it exploded from the pipe, it was in the form of the werewolf, like from the movie that Richie had brought Ben along to see. After narrowly missing Bill, it came after Ben. Ben thrust his thumb into its eye, but he received a slash in the stomach from the monster's claws. They would later evaluate this injury and decide that it's bad, but not quite deep enough to get to Ben's guts. If that really was its intention, it makes sense, because at the end of their story in 1985, it's ultimately defeated when Bill and Richie pull the creature's heart out to crush it. As they're leaving the Neibolt house, Ben has an epiphany about power, and maybe for the first time truly realizes the power of the silver slugs because of their belief in them, and the power of love. Not much goes on for the next 2 weeks, but Ben does think more about the idea that the shape-shifting it may have some kind of standard form, but he doesn't think that they've seen it yet. The day of the big battle would come on August 10th, but this time the Losers Club wouldn't have a chance to confront it on their own terms. One day in early August, Ben hangs out at the Barrens with a box of Junior Mints and a funny book. None of the others are there yet, and the first to show up is Beverly, who runs up to him in a panic. "Shut everything," she panted. "Hurry up, Ben, for heaven's sake. They're coming." "Who?" "Henry and his friends. Henry's gone crazy. He's got a knife." Upon hearing this, Ben actually dropped his Junior Mints and funny book and pulled down the hatch above the clubhouse. Yeah, he actually dropped his Junior Mints. Ben dropped junk food on the ground. If that doesn't illustrate the seriousness of the situation, I don't know what will.
But a regular butterball.
Bev hugged him tightly as the bullies came by and stood on the lid. The two struggled not to laugh at the pure stupidity of one of Belch's jokes, and on top of that, the roof was starting to cave under their weight. But somehow, Bowers and his gang headed off in a different direction, and Ben and Beverly are able to escape. Before leaving, she tells him she knows it was him who wrote the poem, and after denying it at first, he admits that it was him. Bev tells him that she loves all of them. Probably not what Ben was hoping to hear. I mean, something just tells me that he wasn't fantasizing about sharing Bev with the other 5 dudes when he wrote that poem on the last day of school. Ben and Beverly get up and go to find and warn the others about Henry, and they end up going back to the Barrens, since they've now realized that nowhere that they go is safe, and maybe the time has come to take on it. Bill asks Ben to lead them to the pumping station, and on the way, they're spotted by Bowers and company, who chase after them as a storm approaches. The losers somehow manage to escape the bullies and descend into the sewer to take on it. When they arrive in the chamber where it lives, deep below the town of Derry, they find it in the form of a giant spider. Ben is the only one out of the Losers Club who's able to comprehend that there's some kind of shape moving around behind the lights. What he's seeing is the true form of it, the deadlights, and the abstract nature of what it really is terrifies him. Perhaps the only thing that gives him the extra courage to go on was Beverly, who asks Ben to lend some of his power to Bill, who engages in the mind-to-mind ritual with the monster and wins, driving it into a panic deeper down into the sewers. Ben, like many of the others, had the sense that it was dying, and the kids escaped from the now flooding chamber. When they emerge back into the Barrens, the storm is over, but the Kenduskeag River is high and overflowing. Ben and his friends had disrupted the pattern of horrible events in town by defeating Pennywise, and just as they had disrupted the flow of the stream in the Barrens at the beginning of that summer, the area was starting to flood as a result, flushing out the evil that rested in the pipes below Derry. But at some points, the flooding stopped, and I think some small part of each of them knew that they hadn't fully finished off it, as they made a blood pact, agreeing that wherever they were, they would come back should the shape-shifting entity threaten the city again. Defeating it had an immediate effect on all of them. It kickstarted their transition from child to adulthood. Ben continued to live in Derry for the next 2 years until his mom lost her job in 1960, and the two were forced to move out to Nebraska with his Aunt Jean. In the miniseries, it's done a bit differently. Ben and his mom actually come to Derry to stay with his aunt while Arlene gets back on her feet, and Ben has to deal with his asshole cousin.
You're only here because Mom says it's our Christian duty.
That's rich. Ben's Aunt Jean was constantly nagging him to lose weight, so he got fatter out of spite. By the time he started at Eastside High School in Omaha, he had reached 210 pounds.
What a porker.
If Ben thought he had escaped being bullied for his weight when Henry Bowers was locked up in Augusta Asylum after the fall of it, he would have been sorely mistaken, because the guys in the locker room after gym class in high school would slap Ben in the gut and make fun of him. One time, it got so bad he screamed out and fled into the hallway half naked.
They chased me up the hall, past the lockers, and they got me down and they started slapping me. And the coach found me lying there. I was crying, and I thought he was gonna help me.
He didn't. The coach just told him to shut up and squeezed his tits, calling him disgusting, and said that his problem was he was fat in his head, basically suggesting that Ben's eating disorder was mostly mental. Ben thought back to what he and his friends had accomplished when they put their minds to defeating it in 1958.
I said, Coach, you coach track, right? And he sort of sneered at me and nodded. And I said, well, you listen to me, you stone-brained son of a I'm gonna go out for the track team in March, and I'm gonna run down everything you got. I'm gonna run down your best, and then I want a flippin' apology from you.
The coach told him he'd quit his job when that happens. Ben went home and told his mom he wanted to lose weight. At first, she was concerned that he wasn't eating enough, but Ben enrolled in a health and nutrition class at school and figured out he could eat a ton of salad and still lose weight. And his mom felt better about it as long as he was eating something. He started running everywhere. He got a newspaper delivery route, went through pairs and pairs of new clothes, and also picked up a pair of Raycon earbuds for 15% off using the link in the description. These things don't come loose from your ear when you run. It's amazing.
By March, I lost 70 pounds and I had grown 2 inches. Every time I ran, I felt like I could fly.
And you went out?
I went out for track, just like I said I would. First day I was out there, I won the 220 and the 440. I just blew away the coach's best guy.
When Ben went to get his apology, he instead got a punch to the face. He didn't say a thing at first, just swung a roundhouse and knocked me flat on my back. Then he told me to get off the field. Said he didn't want a smart-mouthed bastard like me on his track team. I wouldn't be on it if President Kennedy appointed me to it, I said, wiping the blood out of the corner of my mouth. Ben was excused from that coach's PE class in the following year in 1963. The coach had been wrong about the fat being in Ben's head. It really started with his mother, and consequently, Ben started to use junk food as a crutch to comfort himself. But after having defeated it, he no longer needed that crutch like he used to. After moving on from the Losers Club, Ben was no longer the fat loser he once was. The boy who was left out of baseball games as a child in Derry was now one of the most athletic kids in school. A couple years later, it was time for Ben to move on again, as he graduated high school and once again went west for college. After graduating from college, Ben became one of the most successful architects in North America, even getting the honor of designing the BBC Communications Centre in London. He modeled it after the Derry Public Library, which had a slim glass tube that connected the children's library with the adults section. This could represent the fact that Ben himself had to slim down in his transition from childhood to adulthood. The Communications Centre was basically the Derry Library turned 90 degrees. He became so successful that he managed to afford himself his own Learjet plane and his very own landing strip near Omaha. In 1985, Mike Hanlon called him up to let him know that it was back, and the return of his memories from Derry hit Ben hard. He showed up at a bar called the Red Wheel and downed a whole stein of whiskey after snorting droplets of lemon juice, which was supposed to neutralize the effects of the alcohol. I looked it up and there doesn't seem to be any scientific basis for this claim, but when Ben walked out of the bar, the bartender sensed that he wasn't drunk in the slightest. So this must have been another instance of the power of belief, just as he believed that silver could kill it as a child. Before leaving, he hands the bartender $3 silver to give to his kids, the same ones that his father had given him all of those years ago. The fourth had been melted down to use as ammunition against Pennywise in 1958. Ben's flight to Maine has a layover in Chicago, and the stewardess momentarily thinks that he's dead as he sleeps through the rough flight. Ben meets with his long-lost friends at a reunion lunch in a private room at Jade of the Orient. Ben reveals that he doesn't really remember much of what took place that summer outside of Bill screaming something about the deadlights. He also finds that they all have something in common. Each of them is childless, in Ben's case because he never married. The fortune cookies contain individual fears that each of them have. Ben's contains a pair of bloody teeth. Perhaps the teeth represent a connection to the mouth, which Ben used to eat a lot of junk food and became overweight, or maybe there was some fear that Ben had about Henry Bowers catching up with him and knocking his teeth out. Before they can kill it, they need to regain some of their old memories, so each of them sets out on a personal journey on foot in Derry. Ben walks down the street and sees a turtle drawn on the sidewalk in chalk, a connection to the rival entity of it that I talked about in my Pennywise horror history episode. Ben closes his eyes and reopens them to find that there was just a hopscotch grid, no turtle in sight. He goes to where he spent a lot of his time when he was young, the Derry Public Library. In the miniseries, Richie is the one to visit the library. Miss Davies is no longer there, but the young new librarian, Carol Danner, reads the same story, suggesting that he too would have one more major confrontation with the monster from below. To his surprise, he hears Pennywise's voice come from above. It's standing in the area of the library known as the Stacks, with empty sockets where its eye should have been and holding a balloon. Pennywise taunts Ben using one of Richie's voices, then transforms into Dracula, because I guess it just loves using Universal monster movie icons against Ben, and then disappears, leaving behind a balloon with the text, "Have a good day, tonight you die." Before leaving the library, Ben asks around about Mrs. Sterrett, the librarian who had helped him when he was young, only to find that she had passed away. Then he finds another balloon that says, "I killed Barbara Sterrett." He checks out one book, Bulldozer, one of the same books that he'd taken out the day that he was jumped by Henry Bowers. He previously thought that it was lost where he fell into the Barrens, but looks at the card on the inside and discovers that it is in fact the same copy. Ben, like many of the others, is experiencing things and events from the summer of '58 re-emerging. That night, they all reconvene at the library, where Ben is finally able to remember what he did with the fourth silver dollar, how they had melted it down to create the slugs that were fired at Pennywise. Ben, Bill, Beverly, Eddie, and Richie return to their hotel to go get some rest with the hope of meeting up the next morning to go down into the Barrens. As he sleeps that evening, a call comes through to Ben's room, telling him to come to Eddie's room, and without hesitation, he springs out of bed and rushes to the scene, where he learns Eddie has been attacked by an escaped Henry Bowers, and Mike has also been hospitalized by Henry earlier in the night. Ben, Beverly, Richie, Eddie, and Bill decide that they can't wait until morning. It needed to be taken care of now, and head for the Barrens, where they would walk down to the same pumping station that they'd used to descend into the sewers 27 years prior. Once again, Bill asks Ben to lead them there, and although bushes and shrubs had grown in to reclaim the clearing that they once played in, he guides them past the now cast-aside clubhouse door to the pumping station. Like the day that they had originally conquered it, the machine parts have been turned off, and they're able to climb down into the sewers once more. They make it back to the inner sanctum and are faced once again with the giant spider. This time, they realize that it has a swollen egg sac, essentially telling them that it is pregnant with its soon-to-hatch offspring. Bill once again takes part in the mind-to-mind battle with it. This time, Richie has to join in and save Bill, and the two of them come back from the macroverse after badly damaging the monster. Not wanting to let it get away again, they go on after it. Beverly tends to the injured Eddie, leaving Ben as the only one who can try to eliminate the massive eggs that had been laid across the floor of the chamber. He stomps down on the first egg, and a smaller, rat-sized spider tries to crawl away. Ben lurched after it, on legs that felt like stilts, and brought his foot down again. He felt the spider's body crunch and splatter under the heel of his boots. His gorge clenched, and this time there was no way he could hold back. He vomited and then twisted his heel, grinding the thing into the stones, listening to the cries in his head fade to nothing. As the light in the chamber died, he repeated the process on each egg he could find until he had stamped out about 100, thinking that he'd gotten them all. He reconvenes with Beverly, Richie, and Bill. They defeated it, and this time it would not be reawakening. Ben and Richie helped bring Bill's wife, who they had rescued from the spider's web but was now a vegetable, out of the sewers. They walked for a long way in the dark, not even sure they were going the right way, with Eddie no longer there to guide them. And Ben is the first one to recognize the object peeking through the crack in the top of the pipe. It was the marquee of the Aladdin Theater, which had been destroyed in the storm that took place during the battle. Like the last time they fought it, there was some flooding when they re-emerged to the surface, but this time they could be sure that they'd finished it off because the damage was much worse, destroying almost every building in the downtown area. After having one last breakfast with the losers, or what remained of them, Ben decided to head back to Nebraska. But this time, things would be different. After growing closer to Beverly again, and after her once again realizing that Ben was the one that wrote the poem that she adored so much back then and the 27 years that would follow, he would have a companion this time as he trekked back to the Midwest. Bradley Donovan. No, I'm just kidding, it was Bev. On June 5th, 1985, the two set out together, and when Mike next talks to them, he gets the distinct feeling that they're going to get married. Ben Hanscom built the foundations of the Losers Club. Whether it was his brilliant architectural mind helping them achieve things that most kids could never dream of, or his love for his friends and his future wife that held the group together and inspired them to push forward. So remember what you learned today, kids. Bradley Donovan is a little Girls will only like you if you become attractive, but you also have to watch the other episodes of Horror History in order to be attractive. So make sure you check out that playlist on the left and subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week. Ring the death bell for notifications, and I will see you in the next one. We've got one more It character to cover. Bradley Donovan. I'm done.